Funny how big of an impact one single painting can have on a person's life. Hey friends, today I want to talk to you about how one painting managed to change my life and made me the painter I am today. I know it's a bold claim, but if it wasn't for this one painting, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. But to understand how, let me backtrack a little first. I was always fascinated by art. As a young kid, I would draw alongside my favorite Saturday morning cartoons and dream of growing up to someday being part of whatever or whoever was creating these magical shows that stimulated my imagination every week. Later in my early teens in the 90s, I became a huge comic fan. I dreamed of creating my own characters and stories and of becoming a comic artist or illustrator. Eventually, as a teenager, I developed an interest in fine art after discovering artists like Michelangelo and Rembrandt. And I dreamed of maybe creating profound and meaningful paintings myself one day. But it wasn't until I saw one particular painting that I knew I had to study art and follow the path of becoming an artist and painter. And that painting is Stephen Assel's At Mother. A massive, altar-like oil painting depicting a fringe group of young people. The entire painting can only be described as strange. The subject choice, the symmetry, the painting inside the painting, or the fact that it almost looks like a religious altar piece. A piece of art so imposing, so mysterious and inaccessible that one can't help but wonder what the story behind it might be. And at the time, experiencing this painting as a young teenager, it messed with my head. Now, I wish I could tell you a wonderful and magical story of how I stepped into a museum as a kid and how I was awestruck standing in front of this magnificent painting. But I can't. Reality, unfortunately, is almost embarrassingly unspectacular. Because the way I discovered the painting that would go on to change my life wasn't in a museum, but as a tiny image on the internet on an old CRT monitor. The truth is, I didn't grow up with art as a kid. I didn't even see the inside of a museum until I was like 15 or 16. I'm an immigrant child from a working class family, and growing up, we just didn't have the money or the education to even think of things like art. But art always fascinated me. I would constantly go to the local comic store or the public library and flip through comics and books for hours on end. But eventually, I had access to the internet as a teenager, and the hours and days I would spend in the library or the comic shop were replaced by hours and days of looking at art on the internet. And that's how I discovered this strange painting that would lead me to a life-changing realization. In the weeks and months after seeing this painting for the first time, I constantly kept finding myself thinking about it. And I would regularly go back and look at it for hours on end. But apart from wondering how someone could paint this well and be this skilled, I just couldn't wrap my head around the why. Why would someone with that level of skill, out of all the things you can paint, decide to paint these people in this way? After all, this isn't a piece of illustration or fantasy art. This is a giant portrait of people, presumably supposed to hang in a gallery or museum at some point. To me, there was clearly a dissonance between the subject, the style, the scope, and everything I knew about art at the time. Things just didn't add up in my head, but what it always came down to was the question, why? Why would someone paint these people in this way? Until it one day hit me like a ton of bricks. Why not? Simple as that. Why not? Why wouldn't you? You see, throughout history, artists have always also been time witnesses. Whether it's the subjects, the themes, or the materials they use. With each piece of art, they also always captured a tiny fragment of their time. And that's what the artist did with this painting as well, intended or not. We don't look back at Rembrandt's painting, The Night Watch, for example, and question its existence. We might wonder about the meaning and the intention behind it, but we don't question subject choice and why the people look the way they look. And why would we? They're people of his time, and they're dressed the way they are because that's how people dressed in the 17th century. And why wouldn't Rembrandt capture life, people, or themes in his paintings that were contemporary in his time. If you think about it, the only reason museums aren't full of paintings like at Mother is the simple fact that these people and these costume-like dresses just didn't exist until a few decades ago. You may or may not like the painting, or you may or may not like the subject choice. I don't have a personal affinity to the subject myself, but you gotta appreciate the fact that it depicts genuine people of our time and that it at least captures a tiny fragment of the 21st century. I know this might sound trivial to some people, but this realization was a revelation to a young me. And it inspired me. And many of the questions and topics that I focus on today in my art, what makes a painting contemporary? What makes art fresh, new, different? All those things can be traced back to my experience with this one painting. As a young artist, I had these preconceived ideas of all the things you could and couldn't do, that you're supposed and not supposed to do. But seeing this painting made me rethink a lot of things. It opened my horizon. It taught me a valuable lesson in appreciating things outside my own artistic preferences, but maybe most importantly, it made me realize that figurative painting and realistic art don't have to live in the past, and that there were fresh and exciting ways to bring those seemingly dusty genres into the 21st century. I've had many of these pivotal experiences throughout my career that changed and challenged my mindset. But this painting was the first. And it was the catalyst that made me apply to one of the most prestigious art academies in Europe to study art. In hindsight, not the smartest idea I ever had, but that's a whole different story for a whole nother video. So the next time you find a piece of art that baffles you and that challenges you and everything you know, ask yourself why, but then maybe ask yourself why not. And who knows, the answers you find might surprise you. Friends, I hope you enjoyed this more intimate trip down memory lane type of video, and if you had similar experiences, I would love to read about them in the comments below. Leave a like or a comment if you made it this far into the video, so YouTube knows that you enjoy watching this, and yeah, have a good one.